and increase promotion, preservation, and celebration of the Jamaican culture. Minister Grange also serves as chairman of the Jamaican National Commission for UNESCO. Minister, it's my pleasure to ask you to address us at this time.
His Excellency Matamela Cyril Ramaphosa, President of the Republic of South Africa, the Most Honorable Andrew Holness, Prime Minister of Jamaica, Honorable Dr. Grace Naledi Pandor, Minister of International and Cooperation of South Africa, Senator, the Honorable Kamina Johnson-Smith, Minister of Foreign Affairs and Foreign Trade in Jamaica, Her Excellency Lumka Yengeni, my cabinet colleagues, the Most Honorable P.J. Patterson, former Prime Minister of Jamaica, Consul General Taylor and Consul General Palmer, Professor Sir Hilary Beckers, Chairman of the CARICOM Reparations Commission and Vice Chancellor of the University of the West Indies, the Honorable Mike Henry, Dr. Julius Garvey, Mrs. Davis Mattis, and Mr. Cordell Green, esteemed participants of our second session, members of the National Council on Reparation, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to our Africa Day celebrations and Conversation with Africa. Today, we have the distinct privilege of having the clarion call for recognition, justice, and development for Africans and people of African descent, and for the long overdue reparations for people, sounded by leaders from both sides of the Atlantic, the Most Honorable Andrew Holness and His Excellency Cyril Ramaphosa. We pause to honor the leadership and legacy of President Ramaphosa, a chief architect of the liberation movement in South Africa, as we do our own Prime Minister, albeit the first post-independence-born leader of the nation, PM Holness. Commitment to achieving reparatory justice is manifest through lived examples of providing internal reparations in our history for our people here in Jamaica. As Jamaica and South Africa joined forces in the liberation struggle decades ago, it's fitting then that these two leaders would today share in the cause for reparatory justice and advancement of all African and people of African descent. This battle cry will be echoed throughout our regions and reverberate globally until these notable goals are achieved. We're here today celebrating the triumphs of liberation, which have won for us the right to self-determination, while acknowledging the challenges experienced by people of African descent, including women and girls who still today face intersecting issues in society, which are in part the legacy of centuries-long imposition of slavery and the practices of discrimination and segregation initiated by the transatlantic slave trade, apartheid, and other forms of suppression and oppression. Today, as we mark Africa Day, we commit ourselves to the fight against the repetition of historical tragedies. Sadly, we see evidence of them still today in the form of the worst behaviors of mankind. We repudiate and resist them. Not to do so would be to betray our ancestors whose blood was spilled in wars of liberation so that we can live as free people here in Jamaica. We will never forget our heroes who died for our liberty, among them the Right Excellent Sam Sharp, who was hanged on May 23, 1832, Taki, and many other men and women. We remember the victims of the 1960 Sam Sharpeville massacre in South Africa, the Sharpeville massacre in South Africa, of people demonstrating. We remember Wiggy Bakela, James Beshi, Ephraim Chaka, Gilbert Demo, Elliot Kabe, Miriam Lekita, and Paulina Mafulaste, and many others. They inspired the latter anti-apartheid activities whose names we speak with greater familiarity: Steve Biko, Winnie and Nelson Mandela, Desmond Tutu, Walter Sisulu, Albertina Sisulu, and so many more. As peoples bonded by complex histories, it is against the backdrop of our triumphs, shared rich cultures, strong traditions, and stellar achievements that we take up the responsibility to facilitate the dialogue that unearths truths and forges reconciliation, renew and maintain engagement in furtherance of our lasting cooperation within the African family, and urge unified and sustained movement towards achieving reparatory justice for people, including reparation for people of African descent. We continue the important dialogue which we began in Durban, South Africa on 8 September 2001. It was there that issues and challenges faced by people of African descent were recognized in the World Conference Against Racism, Racial Discrimination, Xenophobia, and Related Intolerance. At this time, I wish to express my appreciation to all those who have made themselves available to participate in this very historic event. I thank you all and wish for you all peace, safety, one love, one aim, one destiny. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Honorable Minister Grange, for your inspiring comments and your remarks. And it's my pleasure now to call on Her Excellency to give her own remarks on behalf of her mission. Her Excellency Lumka Yengeni, High Commissioner of South Africa. A little bit about her. High Commissioner Lumka Elizabeth Yengeni is the head of mission at the South African High Commission in Jamaica. And she also represents the Commonwealth of the Bahamas, Commonwealth of Dominica, Belize, St. Kitts and Nevis, Antigua and Barbuda. And she's ambassador to Haiti. Her mandate is to promote the national foreign interests of the government of South Africa through forging stronger economic and political cooperation with the above-mentioned countries. Her Excellency has been a member of Parliament in the South African government since 2004, serves as a permanent representative of the Republic of South Africa to International Seaboard Authority, ISA, and in her own right understands the importance of revolutionary struggles against systems of oppression. Your Excellency.
The moderator, Professor Vereni Shepherd, Honorable President of the Republic of South Africa, His Excellency Matamela Cyril Ramaphosa, the Most Honorable Prime Minister of Jamaica, Andrew Holness, Honorable Minister Dr. Naledi Pandor of the Republic of South Africa for International Relations and Cooperation, Honorable Minister Kamina Johnson-Smith of Foreign Affairs and Foreign Trade for Jamaica, Honorable Minister Olivia Grange of Culture, Gender, Entertainment, and Sport for Jamaica, and all protocol observed. I would like to take this opportunity to thank the loving people of Jamaica and their government for recognizing the Republic of South Africa, which I am privileged to represent today. As you are aware, South Africa, as a member of the African Union, is actively involved with promoting the integration of the African continent, and in so doing, recognizing and regards members of the African diaspora as the sixth region of the continent. This, therefore, means that this region is integral in terms of importance, given the number of people African descent who make countries in the Caribbean their home. Our relations with the Caribbean dates back decades, especially during the days when your support for our liberation struggle was invaluable. The initial target for hosting this webinar was when South Africa was chair of the Union, AU, the African Union. However, as you are aware, apart from fulfilling our role, our president, as chair, had to support leading an African initiative to ensure that the continent is not further disadvantaged by effects of COVID-19 and does not get left behind in ensuring access in terms of equity of vaccines. Therefore, timing was not on our side. What was originally intended was that the Most Honorable Prime Minister Andrew Holness would organize the meeting between CARICOM and the African Union to discuss how issues could be expedited for implementation. Based on these circumstances, as you are aware, Jamaica offered to host a webinar between Jamaica and South Africa. In this regard, it is my appeal that all necessary influence are used to support making the dreams of the Africans in the diaspora a reality. South Africa has a long tradition of advocating for the inclusion of all members of the African diaspora to be formally included and recognized as the legitimate members of the sixth region. Former African President Thabo Mbeki was a tireless advocate for what I have just said and placed emphasis on this at the African Union during South Africa's chairship at that time. You will recall that during the Third World Conference Against Racism, Racial Discrimination, Xenophobia, and Related Intolerance, that this position was formally adopted. Given the many continued challenges that we face globally, it is imperative that we work together to ensure that within the shortest times and by no later than the first quarter of 2022, the AU and CARICOM webinar is held. As South Africa, we remain confident that your experience in the multilateral arena will lend itself to make this a reality. South Africa and Jamaica share many realities in terms of level of development and socio-economic challenges, but our respective countries are recognized for the political contribution they make towards advocating for a better world and the development of the countries of the South. We can use all of our identified areas for cooperation between South Africa and Jamaica as the basis on which to build a solid foundation for cooperation between the African Union and CARICOM, and in so doing, work towards greater development for all of our peoples. I remain at your disposal as we work towards realization of a unified diaspora for the duration of my tenure in Jamaica and in the Caribbean community. I wish to use this opportunity to thank the Most Honorable Prime Minister Andrew Holness for accepting me and the warm welcome that I received from him and the Minister of Foreign Affairs and Foreign Trade, Honorable Kamina Johnson-Smith, on my arrival to the island, on behalf of the government and the living beautiful people of Jamaica. In closing, I wish to thank His Excellency President Matamela Cyril Ramaphosa of the Republic of South Africa, my country of origin, for the confidence he has shown in me and in my ability to represent and promote South Africa's interests in this great Caribbean community with considerable and distinguished historical links and heritage with Africans in the diaspora. I thank you.
And now, before we hear our heads of government, we're going to break it up a little and hear from Peter Morgan of Morgan Heritage. Peter Morgan is from the Grammy-nominated, award-winning Jamaican reggae band Morgan Heritage, formed in 1994 by children of reggae artist Denroy Morgan. For decades, Peter's distinctive voice has led Morgan Heritage on some of the biggest anthems in modern roots reggae. And you know some of them: Don't Have It Dread to Be Rasta, Down by the River, and She's Still Loving Me. So, Peter Morgan.
Hey, yeah. Wonderful world, beautiful people, you and your girl, things could be pretty, but underneath this, there is a secret that nobody can reveal.
African people, we love music and we love Peter Morgan. Reggae music on Africa Day, the universal music. I'm going to now call on Senator the Honorable Kamina Johnson-Smith to introduce our most honorable Prime Minister. Let me tell you a little bit about her. She received her appointment as the Minister of Foreign Affairs and Foreign Trade of Jamaica on 7th March 2016. In December 2009, Minister Johnson-Smith was appointed government senator, and from January 2012 served as an opposition senator with the responsibility of opposition whip. I always like that title. She was also appointed the spokesperson on education and youth in February 2015. In addition to her portfolio responsibilities, the minister has a keen interest in governance, in education, youth, and gender affairs, and has successfully tabled parliamentary motions regarding public sector governance, reintegration of teen mothers in the formal school system, and the review of laws related to violence against women, children, the elderly, and persons living with disabilities. Honorable Minister, please let us hear from you about the person we're going to have speak to us next.
The Most Honorable Andrew Holness, Prime Minister of Jamaica, Your Excellency Matamala Cyril Ramaphosa, President of the Republic of South Africa, the Honorable Dr. Naledi Mandisa Pandor, my sister and counterpart, Minister of International Relations and Cooperation of South Africa, the Honorable Olivia Grange, Minister of Culture, Gender, Entertainment and Sport for Jamaica, Your Excellency Lumka Yengeni, South African High Commissioner to Jamaica, other distinguished guests and viewers around the world, including, most importantly, our diaspora. Happy Africa Day. It is an absolute pleasure to be here with brothers and sisters to acknowledge the successes of African integration. We laud the work of the African Union, which has led to notable achievements in fostering greater unity between countries and their people, peace, security, and stability on the continent, and promoting sustainable development at the economic, social, and cultural levels. Today's conversation with Africa takes place during the International Decade for the People of African Descent. As the vast majority of the citizens of Jamaica and of CARICOM are of African descent, and our common heritage and experiences ground a strong spirit of understanding and fraternity, the region is deeply committed to the program of activities for the implementation of the International Decade, which will contribute to the full implementation of the program of action. Excellencies, I have the honor and privilege of introducing the Most Honorable Andrew Holness, Prime Minister of Jamaica, for whom the opportunity today to share this platform with President Ramaphosa is a welcome expression of our common destiny of peace, prosperity, strength, and unity. Prime Minister Holness has dedicated his career in public service to making critical interventions in key portfolios, including social welfare, community development, and housing. Prior to becoming Prime Minister, he had a particularly distinguished tenure as Minister of Education, during which he launched and guided several outstanding programs and initiatives and established new institutions which remain critical today. Under his stewardship, more Jamaicans have moved closer to achieving their full potential as healthy and productive citizens in a safe and just society. Before COVID, our government's achievements included bringing unemployment to historical low rates and cutting poverty by 40%. The recovery of all areas of the society and economy from the pandemic in a sustainable manner is therefore his priority. Excellencies, on the global stage, Prime Minister Holness has shaped Jamaica's foreign policy to be both collaborative and pragmatic. Jamaica has maintained an effective and positive global presence that supports our national development goals and our role as good global citizens. Our international collaboration includes advocacy for small island developing states and middle-income countries on issues such as reforming the international financial architecture, financing for social and economic development, and certainly not least, climate change and resilience. As a result of this principled and pragmatic approach, Jamaica's international profile has been significantly raised, and Prime Minister Holness has been invited to participate in various international fora such as summits of the G7, G20, and of course, the BRICS Plus in South Africa. PM Holness has also been invited to co-chair several United Nations high-level initiatives with the Secretary General and heads of government, such as Prime Ministers Trudeau and President Macron. Prime Minister Holness is also a strong proponent of Afro-Caribbean synergy, and this has been reflected in Jamaica's bilateral and multilateral efforts. His visits to Namibia and South Africa were undertaken in that spirit, as was his hosting of the presidents of Ghana and Kenya in Jamaica. Planned visits for 2020 were sadly postponed, but will undoubtedly be revisited when travel normalizes. Excellencies, the bonds between South Africa and Jamaica are strong and continue to manifest in friendship and solidarity, as we remain focused on forging even stronger strategic, economic, cultural, and political cooperation between our people. Excellencies, without more, I would like to give the floor to a gentleman and a leader who has certainly put Jamaica on a good path and who is suited, undoubtedly, to participate in this conversation on a destiny of peace, prosperity, unity, and strength. I thank you.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. Dr. Vereen Shepherd, Professor of Social History and Director of the Center for Reparation Research at the University of the West Indies. His Excellency Matalema Cyril Ramaphosa, President of the Republic of South Africa and a great friend of Jamaica. Senator, the Honorable Kamina Johnson-Smith, Minister of Foreign Affairs and Foreign Trade of Jamaica. The Honorable Dr. Grace Naledi Pandor, Minister of International Relations and Corporations of South Africa. The Honorable Olivia Grange, Minister of Culture, Gender, Entertainment and Sports. Her Excellency Lukma Yengeni, High Commissioner of the Republic of South Africa to Jamaica. Other distinguished Africa Day webinar program participants, officials, academics, partners, and stakeholders joining for these important deliberations. Ladies and gentlemen, representatives of the media, good day. I stand proudly alongside my brother and friend, His Excellency Cyril Ramaphosa, President of the Republic of South Africa, on the occasion of Africa Day 2021, to engage in conversation aimed at forging pathways to peace, prosperity, strength, and unity between continental Africans and other people of African descent. Today's conversation will develop a momentum towards identifying actions which will be actively pursued together to improve the lives of our people. We are resolved that our common goal to create real solutions for a better and stronger future for our people will be realized in this generation. As a liberated people who have emerged from a history of enslavement, colonialism, and oppressive regimes, Africa Day is a special time for celebration and reflection. I'm therefore grateful to you, President Ramaphosa, for sharing this platform to engage on such a significant occasion. I welcome the opportunity to focus on shared ideals for progress, peace, and prosperity, which have been aptly captured by the Program of Activities for International Decade for the People of African Descent, 2015 to 2024. In order to address the present, it is important to understand and repair the past, which for us carries the aberrant and centuries-long practices of enslavement, discrimination, and segregation. On both sides of the Atlantic, we have used the language, rhythm, and tactics of resistance and resilience to secure independence. Today, we lead conversations which critically assess the true measure of our strides and shape the journey towards truth, justice, reconciliation, and reparation, precursors to any attainment of lasting stability and development in the continent and its diaspora. Today, we also recall our ancestors and their indomitable spirit and sacrifice, which sustained us and our efforts. We name those we can: Kojo, Nani, Taki, and Sam Sharp, and reflect on others. We honor them as freedom fighters. We reject any notion of them being criminals, and we have so legislated this in our parliament. It has been 31 years since Nelson Mandela's long walk to freedom, and 6 years into the International Decade for People of African Descent. But our collective global journey as African peoples continues in the conquest and quest for justice. This includes eradicating the inequities which have caused persistent poverty and disenfranchisement of the peoples of the continent and its 6th region, despite our inherent wealth and natural endowment. These inequities have been magnified by the pandemic, in which the people of African descent have suffered disproportionately, both in health and economic terms. Our people are also disproportionately affected by climate change, and in the global space do not enjoy equitable access to education, justice, and equal treatment. The imperative is to harness our wealth and resources, and with equal urgency, we need to rebalance existing international and economic structures in favor of our accelerated development and dignity. Our history teaches us that united, victory is assured. It is the lesson of the Maroon Wars and the struggle against apartheid. We are inextricably bound by bloodline and a shared history. We must therefore be determined to complete the mission of being a fully liberated people, economically independent and resilient. We must strive to overcome systemic and institutional prejudices, inequitable health care and education, and all other residues of enslavement and colonialism that have undermined our progress and prosperity. We recognize that our separation geospatially and psychologically has had a negative effect on all Africans and people of African descent. We must teach our history as a deliberation and celebration of ourselves, grounded in our glorious experiences and not only as oppression. This requires us to reclaim and proclaim our identity and destiny of greatness. As Prime Minister, I have been clear and consistent in my engagements with our partners and within regional and multilateral fora that there must be equity of access to the world's resources for all peoples if we are going to have any hope for peace and development globally. Africa cannot be denied opportunities, nor can the Caribbean, if we are to truly advance the ethos that no one must be left behind. I say this especially in regard to access to vaccines. It cannot be morally justified that rich countries, many of whom gained their wealth and scientific advantage through the exploitation of Africa and its people, now use this wealth and scientific advantage to hoard and stockpile vaccines, while the poor and historically exploited and deprived countries wait in uncertainty to access equitable and consistent supplies, their populations at risk and their economies on pause. It would be the greatest setback for mankind if inequitable vaccine access were to cause uneven recovery and a widening of the development gap between the rich and poor globally. I take the opportunity to commend the government of the Republic of South Africa, and in particular, President Ramaphosa, for his vision in establishing the African Union's African Vaccine Acquisition Trust and the African Medical Supplies Platform. I also express deep appreciation for allowing CARICOM countries such as Jamaica access and participation in these initiatives. This has not only become a critical lifeline for our COVID-19 vaccination response, but a flagship example of South-South cooperation on critical developmental matters, leveraging the purchasing power of Africa as a whole on behalf of smaller, more dispersed populations. Long-standing efforts through the World Trade Organization to introduce fairness and balance in the global trading system have long evaded success. The impact on our countries remains worrying. Economic partnership agreements introduced a new dimension into the special arrangements which came out of our colonial past, yet the record of performance has been mixed and far from encouraging. Through you, Mr. President, I also salute the African Union for the advances it has made in the establishment of the Africa Continental Free Trade Association, a model for the rest of us, and one which grows in strength with each accession. There are significant opportunities for lucrative trade, investment, and tourism links between Africa and the Caribbean, but they have been stymied by a lack of connectivity. Last December, we were happy to welcome to Jamaica the inaugural direct flight from Nigeria to Kingston by Air Peace Airlines, owned by Nigerian business interests. Additional flight arrangements are being pursued to create even more powerful engagement and exchange of a range of goods and services between the continent and its sixth region. Recently, the government of Jamaica, that is, appointed our first ambassador, special envoy for investment to Ghana, Nigeria, South Africa, and Togo. We are actively pursuing the trade and investment routes that support our business opportunities. We are preparing to unleash new strategies for travel, trade, and investment anchored in the will of our people to unite. There is need for government policies and intergovernmental arrangements to facilitate contacts between our countries, to foment even higher levels of trade and investment with economic returns to our people. This will require us to define the goods and services for which we are globally competitive and redirect our investment and trade arrangements to include Africa and its diaspora. Jamaica is prepared to promote itself as a hub for this type of trade and investment arrangement between Africa and the Caribbean and the Americas, activating the African diaspora of the Caribbean and the Americas as the sixth region of the African Union is an imperative. The formation of the new geopolitical force, that is the Africa Group, CARICOM, is a significant milestone to deepen ties on social, economic, cultural, and other issues of common interest. I was looking forward to participating in the first ever summit of heads of government of the African Union and CARICOM, which was contemplated for June last year. Its postponement is sadly another casualty of the pandemic. We look forward to its eventual convening, as we believe this mechanism, among others, will bring us closer to bridging the divide and driving momentum towards a structured modality for engagement. United, we will eradicate the scourge of poverty and associated ills we have experienced, to include extreme inequalities and social injustice. United, we will achieve the goal of the Global Agenda 2030 and the Agenda 2063 of the African Union to eradicate poverty. On behalf of our citizens, we will build an international economic order predicated on an equitable distribution of wealth within and among nations, which supports expanded opportunities for entrepreneurship and creative enterprise. Our common vision of development, which focuses on our most important resource, the talents and abilities of our people, compels us to exponentially increase our investment in them. The culture and creative industries require greater investment from governments. Our African and Afro-descendant cultures have competitive advantage and are in great demand internationally. UNCTAD has indicated that Africans and the people of African descent represent the major element of knowledge and expertise in the creative sector. The United Nations adopted a resolution declaring 2021 the International Year of Creative Economy for Sustainable Development. Our governments need to increase investment in the creative economy and harness the economic opportunities created by our people's creative genius. Within the Ministry of Culture, Gender, Entertainment and Sports, we have launched Jamaica Creative, an initiative geared to create an enabling environment for the cultural and creative industries to thrive. Jamaica is also to pioneer legislation governing and streamlining the creative sector. As we have done with other blocs, it is of utmost importance that we urgently pursue preferential trade and economic arrangements and those which designate creative and other products as local products of continental Africa and vice versa. As we pursue South-South realignment, Africans and people of African descent must work together to demand reparations from European colonial powers for the damage caused to our people who endured over 400 years of enslavement with continuance in post-slavery governance and economic arrangements. Our engagement with not only countries but institutions which benefited from the brutal system of enslavement must also be to that end. And we will provide mechanisms for reparations to be made and paid. Much work has been carried out by the National Council on Reparation in the Ministry of Culture, Gender, Entertainment and Sports and the Center for Reparations Research of the University of the West Indies. Also, the work of the P.J. Patterson Center for Africa-Caribbean Advocacy in Jamaica signals the collaborative and necessary work we require of our universities. We also recognize the work of the Institute for Global African Affairs in Johannesburg and the Institute and the institutions of other universities established in continental Africa. It must be universally acknowledged that every child on the continent and in its diaspora must be assured of high quality, relevant education and access to technology, leverage to innovate and meet the challenges of our time. We cannot assure ourselves of peace, prosperous, strong, and unified societies without technology. We must be prepared to invest in our people with the innovative and entrepreneurial talent and ability to become global competitive creators and innovators. We must collaborate in achieving this, using models which already exist to harness the best of our people and creating new ones where there are none which meet our needs. In closing, the future of African-Caribbean relations is filled with promise and potential. We have the opportunity to build on our deep emotional ties based on a shared history, culture, and sense of a common identity to forge a partnership that can be a political, social, and economic force that can transform the lives of all our people. It will require the investment of time, attention, and political will to realize this potential. Let us unite behind a vision and roadmap towards global African unity which elevates the African people and the people of African descent to the highest levels of greatness and possibilities. Let us recommit to the mission of Garvey, Mandela, and Nkrumah to manifest a united Africa and Africans as a great force for good in the world. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Honorable Prime Minister, Most Honorable Andrew Holness. You know, your comments about vaccine imperialism, my word, not yours, but I think that's a sentiment, resonates with so many people on so many levels. Because really, viruses are by themselves neutral. They slip into our lives without motives and agendas. But when they meet that other pandemic of racism and imperialism, and post-colonialist attitudes, then that's where we have a problem. You are right in your call to end that inequality. Before we hear from His Excellency Matamela Cyril Ramaphosa, I'd like to introduce to you Dr. the Honorable Grace Naledi Pandor, Minister of International Relations and Cooperation for South Africa. She is going to introduce her president. The Honorable Grace Naledi Pandor was appointed as the Minister of International Relations and Cooperation on 30th June 2019. She was Minister of Higher Education and Training from 27 February 2018 to 25 May 2019. She was the Minister of Science and Technology of the Republic of South Africa from 26 May 2014 until 26 February 2018. She has been a Member of Parliament since 1994 and a member of the National Executive Committee of the African National Congress, or ANC, since 2002. And you must have noticed the way in which she's truly a counterpart of Senator the Honorable Camilla Johnson-Smith, Education, and then International Relations and Foreign Affairs. You have the floor.
Thank you very much, Madam Moderator, Professor Vereen Shepherd, His Excellency President Cyril Ramaphosa, the Most Honorable Andrew Holness, Prime Minister of Jamaica, my esteemed colleague, the Honorable Camilla Johnson-Smith, the Minister of Foreign Affairs and Foreign Trade of Jamaica, the Honorable Olivia Grange, Minister of Culture, Gender, Entertainment and Sport of Jamaica, Her Excellency High Commissioner Lumka Yengeni, Her Excellency High Commissioner Comfort, distinguished participants and guests, ladies and gentlemen. Warm greetings from South Africa on this Africa Day to all the distinguished participants. I wish to begin by thanking the Honorable Prime Minister for this initiative, a very important webinar on a critical subject. Today we celebrate Africa, all over Africa and within the diaspora. We also use the time to reflect on the enormous socioeconomic challenges we must still attend to, while acknowledging the progress we have made. The establishment of the Organization of African Unity on 25th May 1963 was a critical step forward in the then still fierce fight for the end of colonialism and apartheid. We celebrate Africa Day today during the time of COVID-19, a pandemic that has had a devastating impact on our societies. It has highlighted the need for even greater solidarity between Africa and the African diaspora in supporting each other to overcome this scourge, particularly by ensuring that vaccines, diagnostics, and other tools are available and distributed equally around the world. And of course, working together in investing in the economic recovery of Africa and the Caribbean. The Caribbean region is our 6th region of the African Union definition of the African diaspora. It's a strategic partner for our country, South Africa, and for the entire continent of Africa, and can be an important spur in the pursuit of Africa's development through aspirations outlined in our Agenda 2063 of the Africa we want. Action on this collaboration is illustrated by the very important collaboration between South Africa and Jamaica through our High Commission in Kingston and the Jamaican Ministry of Culture, Gender, Entertainment and Sport in hosting webinars of this kind, which enhance the relationship between our countries and our regions. My simple task today is the privilege of introducing our President of South Africa. It therefore gives me great pleasure on behalf of my country and our government to welcome His Excellency President Cyril Matamela Ramaphosa to commence with today's keynote address. But before he does so, let me introduce him, something I know he doesn't always like us to do. President Ramaphosa has experienced the entire spectrum of what it means to be a Black person under racist, oppressive regimes. His family was forcibly removed from the then Western Native Township to Soweto in 1962 as a result of the Group Areas Apartheid Act that defined the spaces that Blacks were allowed to live and work in. These experiences inspired President Ramaphosa to become a leader of the South African Student Organization while he was studying at university. His activism against apartheid, and indeed his support for other anti-colonial struggles in the Southern African region, led to him being detained without trial for lengthy periods in 1974 and in 1976. Cyril Ramaphosa helped to establish one of South Africa's largest trade unions, the National Union of Mine Workers, in 1982, and became its first Secretary General. The struggle of the union was not only for workers' rights and political freedoms in South Africa, it also mobilized for those same rights in other African countries. The National Union of Mine Workers was a key platform to build the Congress of South African Trade Unions and the United Democratic Front, which worked with the ANC to liberate South Africa. Cyril Ramaphosa was elected as the ANC Secretary General in 1991 and played a key role in the negotiations that led to our first democratic elections, as well as a key role in the establishment of our constitutional democracy through his role as chairperson of the Constitutional Assembly that gave life to the Constitution, which we celebrate in its 25th anniversary this year. This work was followed by key roles in business and international organizations before he became Deputy President of South Africa in 2014 and President in 2018. President Ramaphosa served with distinction as Chair of the African Union in 2020 and ably steered a coordinated and effective African response to the COVID-19 pandemic. He leads South Africa's participation in the BRICS Forum, the G7 outreach, and in the G20 Forum. Our president is therefore well placed based on his past and his current roles as President of South Africa, with excellent leadership on the continent, to address us on issues of importance to our relationship with the diaspora on this Africa Day. Mr. President, over to you. I thank you.
Program Director, Professor Shepherd, Prime Minister of Jamaica, my very good friend and brother, the Most Honorable Andrew Holness, Minister of Culture, Gender, Entertainment, and Sports of Jamaica, Ms. Olivia Grange, Minister of Foreign Affairs and Foreign Trade of Jamaica, Ms. Kamina Johnson-Smith, Minister of International Relations and Cooperation of South Africa, Dr. Naledi Grace Mandi Sapando, and Her Excellency, the High Commissioner, Angela Comfort, Her Excellency, High Commissioner Lumka Yengeni, and distinguished participants in this webinar, and ladies and gentlemen, it is a great honor and a very rare and singular privilege to join you in this conversation as we celebrate Africa Day. Our thanks go to the people and the government of Jamaica, and to you, my good friend, Prime Minister Holness, for having called me and spoke to me about this webinar many moons ago that demonstrates your forward planning. Thank you for hosting this engagement and for reminding us of our shared heritage, our shared values, our shared aspirations, and indeed, our shared future. Today, we celebrate the unity of the African people, those who live on the continent, and those who are in the diaspora of African descent. Today, we celebrate the ties that bind us together, ties that no ocean, be it the Atlantic Ocean or any other, no slave trader, no war, and no pandemic can tear asunder. This is the day on which we commemorate the establishment of the African Organization of African Unity nearly 60 years ago, 1963, which we now refer to as the African Union. The world was a vastly different place back then when the OAU was established. Jamaica had just gained independence the year before, joining a wave of movements that were sweeping across much of the global South. The people of South Africa were still suffering under a very cruel, racist regime. And it would be a full 58 years before we attained our freedom. The great luminaries and thinkers of the Caribbean were at the heart of the Pan-Africanist movement that inspired our own liberation struggle. I speak here of CLR James and Henry Sylvester Williams of Trinidad, Frantz Fanon of Martinique, Walter Rodney of Guyana, and Marcus Mosiah Garvey of Jamaica, among others. I also speak here of General Toussaint Louverture, who was the leader of the Haitian Revolution, of the Cuban internationalists, and of the many men and women from the region who played a leading role in struggles against oppression, racism, fascism, and colonialism. I speak also of Robert Nesta Marley, one of Jamaica's most famous sons, whose music didn't define just one generation, but continues to provide hope and inspiration to people around the world even today. It was these sons and daughters of Africa whose ideas, proclamations, and actions contributed so much to the drive for African unity, independence, and self-reliance. This conversation today is particularly meaningful for us as South Africa. We remember with the deepest of humility and gratitude the invaluable support from Jamaica. Jamaica gave our struggle a real big boost of support. Jamaica was one of the first countries to impose a trade embargo on apartheid South Africa and supported successive UN resolutions aimed at the elimination of apartheid. In 1987, the president of the African National Congress, which I lead today, Oliver Tambo, visited Jamaica and delivered an important speech in Kingston on the unity of the African diaspora. We recall the joyous reception that Nelson Mandela received in Jamaica in 1991, following his release from prison. It is a testament to the unwavering support of the Jamaican people for the struggle for our freedom that 3 Jamaican prime ministers, P.J. Patterson, Edward Seaga, and Michael Manley, who have been bestowed with our National Order of the Companions of O.R. Tambo. That cherished relationship continues into the present, driving our shared efforts to build a more just, peaceful, and inclusive global community. Our common African heritage provides the rich soil from which our common future will grow. Since the countries of Africa gained their independence, as apartheid and minority rule was defeated, we have sought to cultivate the relationships between the peoples of Africa and the Caribbean diaspora. The inaugural Global African Diaspora Summit in Johannesburg in 2012 was the culmination of years of engagements and consultations, giving clear form and focus to our collective aspirations. We must acknowledge the progress that we have made in forging unity within the diaspora with our brothers and sisters who are of African descent. The diaspora agenda is now fully integrated into the activities of the African Union. For example, the Citizens and Diaspora Directorate of the African Union is working on documenting the valuable work of people of African descent in the Caribbean in providing humanitarian assistance in emergencies and pandemics. The diaspora has an important role to play in meeting the aspirations of the AU's Agenda 2063, and also in helping African countries to meet the Sustainable Development Goals. At the 34th Ordinary Session of the Assembly of the African Union in February, the years 2021 to 2031 were declared as the decade of African roots and diasporas. This is an initiative aimed at strengthening the role and contribution of people from African roots and diaspora to the economic, social, and cultural development of the African continent. Now, the diaspora is the 6th region of the African continent in terms of the AU, signaling our desire to build ever closer relations and our determination to deepen collaboration between bodies like the African Union and CARICOM. Many people in the African diaspora are actively engaged in the continent's development. This global African community, made up of people of African descent, represents a vast pool of knowledge, expertise, energy, and commitment, able to make a tremendous contribution to Africa's growth and progress. The African Union's theme for 2021 is Arts, Culture, and Heritage, levers for building the Africa that we want. This is part of our effort to enhance the contribution of art, culture, and heritage as a catalyst for social and economic development and integration. It is an opportunity to explore, to celebrate, and develop all of Africa's cultural treasures, both those that reside on this side of the Atlantic and those that reside on your side. Our shared histories provide many opportunities to deliver a unified message to the world about the vast potential of the African continent. These are opportunities to influence policies that unlock trade, investment, and development. At the same time, our common histories and experiences must be harnessed in the cause of justice for the descendants of victims of the transatlantic slave trade. We commend the advocacy of the government of Jamaica as part of the CARICOM Reparations Commission for Reconciliation, Truth, and Justice for victims of slavery and their descendants. Just as the world must recognize the horrific crimes committed against people of African descent, so too must it acknowledge that the devastating social and economic legacy of slavery continues into the present. This is about a struggle to recognize the intergenerational trauma that lingers still and that has held back development of whole societies. It is about the restoration of dignity, about justice, and about building a better future for all. Your Excellency, my brother, now more than ever, as the world confronts the pandemic that is gripping the entire world, we are called upon to act in unity and solidarity. As we stood together against colonialism, as well as apartheid and injustice, now we must stand together to overcome the coronavirus pandemic. Our struggle, however, is not just against a virus. It is a struggle against the deep inequalities that have so severely hampered global efforts to contain the pandemic and have left so many societies vulnerable to hardship and despair. It is therefore a priority that we must confront and overcome all forms of global injustice that favor the few at the expense of the many. We must confront the vaccine apartheid that is allowing wealthy countries to buy up vaccines whilst less resourced developing countries languish in the queue. South Africa and India have sponsored a proposal at the World Trade Organization for a temporary TRIPS waiver to allow countries in need to produce COVID-19 vaccines and medical products. Now, I want to use this opportunity to thank Jamaica for supporting the proposal that we've put forward from the floor. With your support and the support of an ever-growing list of countries, I have no doubt that we will prevail. We also welcome your ongoing support for the Access to COVID Tools Accelerator as it works to provide equitable access for all to vaccines, diagnostics, and treatment. This Africa Day, it is our ardent wish that we deepen our collaboration to overcome poverty, inequality, underdevelopment, disease, illiteracy, gender-based violence, and conflict. And I know, my dear brother, that these are matters that are also very close to your heart. In my exchange with you, I have felt the heartbeat of your heart in support of ensuring that we build a better world and that the peoples of Africa, the peoples of African descent in the Caribbean must also live a better life. In doing so, we are guided by the overarching objective of finding African solutions for African problems. Solutions that are going to be fit for purpose also for people of African descent in the Caribbean. During our tenure as a non-permanent member of the UN Security Council in 2019, South Africa and other African members of the Council worked closely with the Caribbean nation of St. Vincent and the Grenadines. This organic cooperation was a practical demonstration of Africa-Caribbean partnership for peace and security. We share a common commitment to building a continent that is stable, developed, prosperous, and capable of delivering the better life that all its people yearn for. Sustainable peace can only be achieved by building a just world, a rules-based international order that is inclusive and that addresses the root causes of conflict, such as poverty and underdevelopment. In January this year, the Africa Continental Free Trade Area came into operation. It establishes a continental market of some 1.3 billion people. This is a major milestone towards the economic integration of our continent. This is the clearest affirmation that Africa is determined to take charge of its own destiny, and that its success is fundamentally tied to harnessing the potential and energies of its people, including those in the diaspora. The African Continental Free Trade Area will improve the prospects of Africa as an investment destination. It will advance the empowerment of Africa's women by improving women's access to trade opportunities, which will in turn facilitate economic freedom for women and expand the productive capacity of countries. As nations that have known oppression and the denial of rights, as a people, we remain forever on the side of justice for the oppressed, wherever they are. We must all be concerned about the resurgence in many parts of the world of racism, ultranationalism, xenophobia, and other forms of intolerance. We stand united behind the Black Lives Matter movement because it is Black men, women, and children who are more often than not on the receiving end of prejudice and violence. Ours is a movement for respect, for human rights, and for the affirmation of our dignity. In the words of Marcus Garvey, our desire, he said, is for a place in the world not to disturb the tranquility of others, but to lay down our burden and rest our weary backs and feet by the banks of the Niger, and sing our songs and chant our hymns to the God of Ethiopia. Yes, he continued, we want rest from the toil of centuries, rest of political freedom, rest of economic and industrial liberty, rest to be socially free and unmolested, rest from lynching and burning, rest from discrimination of all kinds, close quotes. As a people who have known centuries of suffering, oppression, we have a moral duty to stand with the Palestinian people and the people of Western Sahara in their quest for nationhood and self-determination. We know that freedom for only some is freedom for none. We share a common position that reform of the UN system is urgently needed. We need a fair system of global governance that allows for the voices of all countries, big or small, to be heard regardless of their economic strength or military might. It is my hope that this dialogue will serve as a catalyst for decisive action and lead to the deepening of partnerships between our continent, Africa, and those who are in the Caribbean of African descent. This is the time for us to unite and to work together and to continue the onward march to prosperity and progress as a united people of African descent. I'd like to thank you for organizing this wonderful webinar where we are able to exchange views and thoughts across the Atlantic. And my brother, I'd like to thank you, and I'm hoping that we will be able to see each other soon once this pandemic has subsided quite substantially. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency, for that inspiring address. And I should say, Nkosi. Thank you for reminding us of the role of Trinidadian Henry Sylvester Williams and his collaborators, the forerunners, if you wish, to 1958 and 1963. Thank you for invoking the ideological position of Marcus Mosiah Garvey, because that was always there, inspiring our ancestors of Africa Day, the OAU, and the AU. Thank you for reminding us about the International Decade for People of African Descent. I'm so proud as a Jamaican that I was chair of the working group of experts on people of African descent at the United Nations in Geneva, and that I walked the entire process through drafting the program of activities for the International Decade. That has really marked my work at the United Nations. We are into the 6th year. Together, we must see that we do what is right. And it was not without opposition, and you would remember Durban 2001 and the struggles over the Durban Declaration and Program of Action. And that, of course, influenced some of what we went through in drafting the International Decade. And thank you for reminding us that we must continue to fight against racial discrimination. And I'm really proud that Jamaica and South Africa have members on the Committee on the Elimination of Racial Discrimination, the CERD, and together, Jamaica and South Africa and 16 other members are fighting this scourge around the world. But, Your Excellency, a luta continua victory is certain. Before I call on Honorable Minister Grange to give the vote of thanks and to lead us into the next session, introduce the next session, I think, again, based on your speech, we need a Marley, because I think you started to say unto the philosophy which holds one race superior and another inferior is finally and permanently discredited and abandoned. Everywhere is war. That's not what we want. We want one love. So let Julian Marley take that away.
Ooh, one, 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 one. Hey, one love, one heart. Let's get together and feel alright. Let's get together and feel alright. Whoa, let them men pass all their dirty remarks. There is one question I really love to ask. Is there a place for the hopeless sinners who have hurt all mankind, just to save his own to believe it? One love, one heart. Let's get together and feel alright. Let's get together and feel alright. Let's get together to fight this holy Armageddon. So when the man comes, there will be no doom. Have pity on those whose chances go fairness. There ain't no hiding place from the Father of creation. Singing one love, Lord of mercy. Let's get together and feel alright. Let's get together and feel alright. One love, one heart. Let's get together and feel alright. Let's get together and feel alright. Got to unite right now. Got to live in love right now. Let's get together and feel alright. Unite, yeah. East, west, north, and south. No matter where you are, gotta get together now.
One love, one heart. Let's get together and feel all right. I want to thank His Excellency President Ramaphosa and the Most Honorable Andrew Holness for providing the insight and inspiration that they have, and for setting out a roadmap to repair our past, secure enduring justice, reclaim our identity, and engage in the strategic work and collaboration which will unify us around advancing the welfare of our people and our whole human race. We commit to multiplying the dividends of the investment we have made today to strengthen the bond among our people. It is indeed an honor and a great assurance to navigate the global space with fixity of purpose, in locked step and sisterhood with my colleagues, Minister Kamina Johnson-Smith, and distinguished counterpart, the Honorable Dr. Grace Naledi Pandor of South Africa. I count too in this number Professor Vereen Shepherd, who ably moderated today's proceedings and who keeps our history ever before us, while in parallel pursuing paths of equity and peace for people. We who are charged to lead will continue to carry out the mandate of our respective citizens to expand opportunities for connectivity between us, leverage our strengths, and accelerate development. We commit to maintaining activism and action which will honor the sacrifice of those who fought, suffered, and died. We will never forget those who were forced to endure the horrors of the transatlantic slave trade. We remember those who martyred themselves on the journey in protest and those who never reached our shores, like the hundreds we commemorate who were thrown overboard for convenience in one of the greatest travesties, the Zong Massacre. I commend the tremendous work and contribution of the National Council on Reparation and all our partners for the bold steps that have made today a reality and will inform the policies that will lead us to success. Your Excellency, Yengeni, for your commitment to this mission and the success of today, we express our appreciation to you and your delegation. We look forward to the journey ahead that will bring to our global audiences a continuation of these exchanges that will have us realize in this generation our due recognition as a people, justice, peace, security, and prosperity. We close this session today with a renewed sense of purpose and resolve to secure reparation for our people, achieve African unity, pragmatic Pan-Africanism, and one love. We look forward to the continuation of the conversation after a short interval of our cultural offerings, which will lead to a high-level discussion, which will close today's proceedings. So as I close, thank you, Mr. President. Thank you very much. Thank you, Prime Minister. Today is a glorious day. Today, Africa Day. All that is left for me to say, in Marcus Garvey's words, up, up, you mighty race, accomplish what you will. God bless you all. Thank you so much.
Have lion heart, Femilo have lion heart, strong and everlasting, only for you. never dawn. Fear love will never dawn. Strong and everlasting. True blood, me say true blood, oh. True blood, me say true blood, oh. And never meet again. If we part and never meet again, for me love is like a king of rain, strong and everlasting. Only for you. Only for you. True blood, oh. True blood, me say true blood, oh. Of lion heart, feel me love have lion heart, strong and everlasting, only for you. Feel me love will never dawn, feel me love will never dawn, strong and everlasting.
I know you heard it. It's heartbreaking to see it. People are dying, families are crying, trying to find some peace. Time's on. We are divided by greed, yeah. Let's all hold hands. Let love take the lead. Let's get it together. It will be alright. We can get it together. Let's all unite. Let's get it together. It will be alright. We can get it together. Let's all unite.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where in the world you are. Welcome to the second session of the Africa Day Symposium from Kingston, Jamaica. My name is Cordell Green, your moderator. What an excellent opening session. As we heard, Africa Day is not only for reflection by the African Union, but also to deepen relations with the diaspora in pursuit of peace, prosperity, strength, and unity. We have also heard that the UN International Decade for People of African Descent ends in 2024. Of course, while the rest of the world might end their deliberate and sustained focus on Africa in 2024, ours is a familial relationship. So it is not bound by time, it is intuitive, and it is a permanent gaze. In a sense, for us, Africa Day is a Mother's Day. So welcome all siblings, whatever your preferred designation, Garveyite, Pan-Africanist, reparationist, as long as you're a black man, a black woman, or a black child, you are an African, and this is our day. Part one was at a very high level, and we come now to the immersive experience, with a panel which could be no more composite in its intellectual and experiential depth and scope, comprised of statesmen, oracles, and griots. The first distinguished speaker is chair of the National Commission on Reparations, member of the CARICOM Reparation Council, commissioner of the Jamaica National Commission for UNESCO, general counsel at the University of the West Indies, among several other roles. Mrs. Lalita Davis Mattis.
Good morning. Jamaica is in the throes of celebrating the International Decade for People of African Descent, as proclaimed by the United Nations General Assembly under the theme, People of African Descent, Recognition, Justice, and Development. And what a decade it has been so far. A renewed thrust that Black lives do matter, a global resurgence of racial tension with peoples of African descent at the forefront of the narrative, a redefinition of cultural monuments, including their demise, and a renewed call for reparatory justice. In 2019, the government of Jamaica launched the start of a year of local activities in recognition of the decade. The Jamaica 57 Independence Grand Gala saw the Prime Minister, the Most Honorable Andrew Holness, and President of the Republic of Kenya, His Excellency Uhuru Kenyatta, announced their commitment to work together to activate initiatives which form part of the decade. It is with great pleasure that I bring opening remarks at an event like this, a continuation of discussions on engagements with Africa. Uhuru Kenyatta announced their commitment to work together to activate initiatives which form part of the decade. It is with great pleasure that I bring opening remarks at an event like this, a continuation of discussions on engagements with Africa from Jamaica. Any discourse on reparation and repatriation must include conversations with Africa. These conversations are critical to the development of Africans across the globe, to the repositioning of Black people, and to a redefinition of race within a global context of equality and equity. The National Council on Reparation, formerly the National Commission on Reparation, was established by the government of Jamaica in 2009 to recommend the form or forms which reparation may take and to receive testimonies from the public and from experts with the aim of guiding a national approach to reparatory justice. The Council in the Ministry of Gender, Entertainment and Sport, under the guidance of the Honorable Olivia Grange, has been continuing the legacy. Discourses with Africa, with a focus on forging tangible links for future engagements between Jamaicans, Caribbean peoples, the African diaspora, and our motherland, Africa. The National Council commenced this discourse years ago. Most recent engagements include discussion with Ghana, His Excellency Napoleon Abdullahi, on opportunities for engagement with Ghana, especially for our youth. A webinar in commemoration of World Day for African and Afro-Descendant Culture under the theme People of African Descent, Defamation, Race Relations, and Development Institutions. Conversations with the African National Congress Women's League under the theme Resistance, Resilience, and Recognition with the President of the Women's League and the Young Convener. 2019 was the year of return, and members of the National Council went to Ghana to participate in these events. In August 2018, the Deputy Chairperson of the African Union, Ambassador His Excellency Thomas Kwesi Kwartey, concluded a series of visits to the Caribbean, which included stops in Trinidad and Tobago, Guyana, and Jamaica. In June 2020, the Honorable Olivia Grange announced a renewed thrust to continue island-wide consultations towards the framing of a national policy on reparatory justice for Jamaicans. She noted that the result of the consultations will be a robust policy of intergenerational scope to guide this and successive governments on the path to reparatory justice. Reparation is a discussion that must be seen within a framework that demands continuous engagements. It's an intergenerational approach. We today are speaking for those generations yet unborn. The same concept that drove our ancestors to relentless fights against injustice. We represent the voices of those to come. Negotiations about reparation is not about the release of obligations by the payment of funds or technological transfers. It's more than that. It's a recognition that there is really no valuation on the suffering, the continued defamation, and systemic systems that govern how Black people are profiled and treated globally. This conversation today is one among many. For until we all, as Black people, embrace the fact that the enslavement of Africans was a crime against humanity, a crime against us, that crimes are punishable, and that compensation forms part of the discourse, until we recognize that we owe it to our ancestors, to ourselves, to the present and future generations, to stand up and be a part of the articulation of these rights, we will be talking for a very long time. The National Council on Reparations is a sounding board for all Jamaicans. The CARICOM Reparation Commission is a sounding board for all Caribbean peoples, wherever we are located. I use this platform to encourage you to take us to task, to become part of the momentum, not as spectators, but as participants. I am positive that this event will jolt us to action. Let us start somewhere. Thank you.
Thank you, Lalita, for that succinct and excellent overview of the National Council on Reparations. And now we continue with Africa in all her radiance, beauty, and intellect, synthesized and manifest in the persona of the Vice Chair of the United Nations Committee on the Elimination of Racial Discrimination, Director of the Center for Reparation Research, former Chair of the UN Working Group of Experts on People of African Descent, Professor Emerita of the University of the West Indies, etc., etc. Professor Vereen Shepherd.
Thank you very much, Mr. Cordell Green, for your introduction, and greetings to fellow speakers and our online audience as we continue to observe Africa Day and our conversation with Africa. And as we recall that 1 year ago to this day, on May 25, 2020, George Floyd was murdered, globalizing the Black Lives Matter movement and drawing us all in an important conversation about justice, equality, and non-discrimination. For those just joining us, I say Happy Africa Day, even as we know that we are conscious that two pandemics are marching side by side and disrupting our world: COVID-19 and racism. A reminder that just a year after its independence, Ghana, under the leadership of Kwame Nkrumah, convened the first Conference of Independent African States on 15th April 1958. The conference was an unequivocal assertion of Africa's rejection of colonial and imperialist domination of the continent. It became the first Pan-African conference to be held on the continent, bringing together various African countries. To further encourage and forge a common goal of fighting against colonial rule, the conference called for the observance of African Freedom Day once a year, to mark the onward progress of the liberation movement and to symbolize the determination of the people of Africa to free themselves from foreign domination and exploitation. Consequently, 15th April was enacted as African Freedom Day or Africa Liberation Day, and this marked the beginning of what would later be known as Africa Day and proceeded to form, of course, the OAU, the Organization of African Unity, and the AU, to solidify continental relationships and common struggles. Before that, in the nearly half century between 1900 and 1945, various political leaders and intellectuals from Europe, North America, and Africa met 6 times, but outside of Africa, to discuss colonial control of Africa and develop strategies for eventual African political liberation. In 1900, for example, Trinidadian Henry Sylvester Williams organized the first Pan-African meeting in collaboration with several black leaders representing various countries of the African diaspora. The Pan-African Congresses helped to increase international awareness of racism and colonialism in the tradition of Marcus Mosiah Garvey and laid the foundation for the political independence of African nations. African leaders such as Kwame Nkrumah of Ghana, Nnamdi Azikiwe of Nigeria, and Jomo Kenyatta of Kenya were among several attendees of congresses who subsequently led their countries to political independence. The influence of these men helped galvanize the formation of the OAU. The founding of the OAU then is referred to today as Africa Day. So again, happy Africa Day. I'm so honored to have been asked to participate in this year's Africa Day events. I was born in Africa, but Africa sent Mary, Jamaica, on a former plantation owned by the enslaving Hibbert family in the UK, but which became a post-slavery land settlement for the peasantry. And my father was able to buy 5 acres of land on that former plantation that became a land settlement. It was not officially named Africa, of course. The district was Hopewell, but the colonial miseducation and missionary propaganda about that other side of the ocean caused people to call it Africa. Today, I am even prouder to have been born in Africa, as DNA results indicate that my ancestors on my mother's side were abducted from among the Tikar people in the country now called Cameroon, that my great-great-grandfather Alexander Mighty was born into slavery and freed in 1834 with nothing but freedom, while enslavers like the Hibberts were unjustly rewarded financially. Because that history has given me the energy to be an integral part of the repatriate justice movement. So by any definition, I am an African. Being part of all these people and in the knowledge that none dare contest that assertion, I, like Thabo Mbeki, shall claim that I am an African. Slavery, like that practiced by the Hibberts, was one of those historical tragedies suffered by both South Africa and Jamaica. Like other historical tragedies, it was rooted in the ideology of white supremacy and racial discrimination, which is why I have titled my paper, Learning from Historical Tragedies to Combat Racial Discrimination Today. Many of us here are familiar with the major historical tragedies or inhumane actions that have affected global history and which were related to racial or ethnic hierarchizing and discrimination, including conquest, colonization, genocide against indigenous and minority populations, the African Ma'afa or Maangamizi, wars to suppress enslaved-led protests, anti-colonial post-slavery protests and independence movements, acts of ethnic cleansing, racial apartheid, the brutal suppression of more modern civil rights and labor movements, land appropriation and underdevelopment, 20th century wars of expansion to empower some nations at the expense of others, and the list goes on. The latest tragedy is COVID-19, which has created vaccine imperialism, unmasked racism where it was covert, disproportionately affecting indigenous peoples, people of African descent, and generally those in post-colonial societies left in a situation of underdevelopment by those who enriched themselves, then ran away from the consequences. There was untold suffering as a result of these tragedies and inhumane acts, including murder, torture, public flogging, imprisonment, and general humiliation. And the descendants of those whose ancestors suffered, for example, from the African Ma'afa, have tried to find ways to memorialize their ancestors and seek redress for such tragedies, including through reparation. We need to learn from historical tragedies to combat racial discrimination today. So I applaud all of you assembled here today for showing by your presence that you share a common concern for the creation of a world in which racism, racial discrimination, xenophobia, and related intolerance play no part either in our or in our international relations. Regrettably, we still live in a world where ethnicity, socially constructed race, the tyranny of the pigmentocracy, gender, religious beliefs, cultural practices, sexual orientation, and other differences act as barriers to harmony. And the group that suffers most from racism and racial discrimination are Africans and people of African descent, which is why the United Nations Programme of Activities for the International Decade for People of African Descent, 2050 to 2024, is so critical. It offers us diverse strategies for righting the wrongs of the past so that we can build a more peaceful world. But halfway into the decade, we continue to be confronted with evidence that we are still some way from realizing that goal of universal peace, interethnic harmony, and unbiased justice that so many have worked to achieve, indeed shed their blood to attain. We see the evidence today in the hands in the air because Black Lives Matter campaign that transformed itself from a local to a global movement in the wake of the murder of George Floyd. In the racial taunts directed at Black players at football games, where on occasion macaco or monkey is shouted from the stands with complete disregard for the feelings of Black players. In institutional and structural racism, in racial profiling at international borders and within some countries, in messages and ideas based on racism, racial superiority or hatred that incite racism, in targeted police stop and frisk or search, in biased employment practices, in differentiated access to justice, political power, housing, health care, and quality education, in disproportionate incarceration rates by ethnic groups, in biased textual and visual representations, cartoons and journalistic pieces that disrespect others' religion and ethnicity, in everyday speech and attitudes that reflect xenophobia and bigotry, in cultural practices that humiliate particular ethnic groups, in the iconic symbols placed in some places that remind formerly oppressed populations of the perpetrators of the tragedies of the past, and in so many more areas. Today, our mission must be to join with the international community in the global call for concrete action for the total elimination of racism, racial discrimination, xenophobia, and related intolerance, and the comprehensive implementation of and follow-up to the Durban Declaration and Programme of Action, the DDPA. Indeed, the DDPA, adopted at the World Conference Against Racism, Racial Discrimination, Xenophobia, and Related Intolerance in Durban in 2001, underlines the fact that promoting greater respect and trust among different groups within society must be a shared but differentiated responsibility of government institutions, political leaders, grassroots organizations, and just citizens. It is for these victims of historical tragedies like the Haitian Revolution, the Morant Bay War, in which hundreds of men and women were executed, and the 1960 Sharpeville Massacre in South Africa, that the Caribbean, as the sixth region, urges our family on the continent to overturn the uncertainties of Durban 2001, when bilateralism was chosen over Pan-Africanism in the reparation struggle, to join us now. And those of you who have read Professor Sir Hilary Beckles' book, Britain's Black Debt, will get the whole story about what went down in Durban, because he was there, our Vice Chancellor, who is batting for social justice all around the world. The theme of our conversation includes a destiny of peace, but we know that peace requires truth-telling and justice. These historical tragedies or harms and breaches of international human rights law require a remedy. We must be bold and courageous and take on this fight against those who colonized Africa and the African diaspora, and who refuse to acknowledge their crimes and engage with us in a reparatory justice conversation. And we must do so in the name of our ancestors who suffered these terrible tragedies that I outlined. I share the sentiment so eloquently articulated by former President of South Africa, Thabo Mbeki, in his speech to which I referred early. And I pause to say I thank him for having invited me and others to South Africa to talk about the Caribbean as preparation for President Aristide's stay in his country. Today, as a country, we keep an audible silence about these ancestors of the generations that live, fearful to admit the horror of a former deed, seeking to obliterate from our memories a cruel occurrence which, in its remembering, should teach us not and never to be inhuman. In conclusion, the ties that bind South Africa and Jamaica are deep and long-lasting. We are bound by historical experiences, slavery and apartheid in both countries, as well as by contemporary realities of injustice. Today, while we deepen our solidarity, let us be aware that solidarity is best expressed through cooperation. Economic cooperation and political solidarity, especially around the issue of reparatory justice, those must continue. If we truly want to make peace and prosperity our imperative, strength our destiny and destination, and rebuild those bridges broken by colonizers. We must eschew the modern chattelization of our people in the time of COVID-19 and act as if Black lives truly matter for the sake of Africa and its diaspora. May Nelson Mandela's impassioned words forever ring in our ears. Never, never, and never again shall it be that this beautiful land will again experience the oppression of one by another. And may we modify those words and make our own commitment and pledge. Never, never, and never again will our beautiful world continue to be scarred by racial hatred and intolerance of diversity and descend into chaos because of obduracy and intolerance. Let us join hands across the continents and oceans and build sturdier bridges of understanding as called for by CARICOM's 10-point reparatory justice program. But there can be no peace without equal rights and justice, as Peter Tosh told us, and the late Robert Nesta Bob Marley, that revolutionary icon, using the philosophy of His Imperial Majesty Haile Selassie, that first long caution, and I just read 2 lines, until the philosophy which holds one race superior and another inferior is finally and permanently discredited and abandoned. Every race war, we don't want war. A luta continua, but victory is certain if we unite. Nkosi.
Professor Shepherd, thank you for an excellent presentation and a lesson in applied history. Time is of the essence, otherwise we would have extended your time at the podium. And we are proud of your international work to advance the welfare of African peoples. We now turn to an undisputed champion of reparatory justice. The Honorable Mike Henry tabled a private member's motion in the Jamaican Parliament in 2007 to pursue reparations from the former colonial governments. That has to be recorded as a hallmark of his very distinguished career of over 40 years in public service, politics, and public policy development, including various ministerial portfolios and as a member of Parliament. It's a pleasure to introduce the Honorable Mike Henry.
Honorable Olivia Grange, Minister of Culture, Gender, Entertainment and Sport. Her Excellency Lumka Yengini, as I got that correct, High Commissioner of South Africa to Jamaica, Most Honorable P.J. Patterson, QC, former Prime Minister of Jamaica, Dr. Julius Garvey, my friend, Pan-Africanist activist, Professor Vereen Shepherd, Director of Center for Reparation Research, Mrs. Lolita Davis Mattis, Attorney at Law, Moderator, Mr. Cordell Green. Courtesies having been extended, I'll pause at that and say to the wider world web, it's my pleasure to be here this morning. Certainly it's afternoon. I noticed that they picked up early, time is of the essence. in my lifetime is more than their sense. And in the context of that, I must say very carefully and very clearly that I'm still an older man in a hurry. But I'm not in a hurry except to see that they pay us what you owe us success being made to us for reparations. As we pay homage to Africa in this symposium on Africa Day, I preface my presentation against the background of my 50 years of my lifelong service and how much it was influenced in part by Chief Abiola and his group of eminent persons with one of our own, Dudley Thompson, and the Honorable Prime Minister, P.J. Patterson. In my book, Many Rivers to Cross, Many More Still to Cross, my presentation to Parliament was prefaced in that presentation I made by citing what Chief Abiola said in that period. He said, the question before us is whether an African slavery reparations movement should pursue legal paths or political paths. 15 years ago, I said in my parliamentary presentation that I would seek the political path to engender the legal path. Thank God the day has arrived when we must confront that and make our decisions. With me asking all of us to join in this march, I do so against the background that it's 15 years ago that we passed that resolution. And here we are 15 years later, still seeming to visit the historical analysis of the reality of man's greatest inhumanity to man in slavery. So September 2007 was then I presented that presentation. And 2021, I'm here speaking now of my next presentation, because I've not abandoned the cause. I'm remain motivated by two voices I've heard in my own lifetime. I quote Marcus Mosiah Garvey, "None but ourselves can free our minds." And Bob Marley, "Old pirates, yes they rob I, so lie to the merchant ship." The practice of slavery, but more so chattel slavery, has always been rooted in political and economic considerations. So too was emancipation, and at the same time is true of the issue of reparations. Moral considerations evolving over generations of changing and social mores and political realities have given rise to the views and have strengthened the imperative for reparations. Whatever the motive, however the realities are inescapable, injury was done, relief is justified, and since injury cannot be reversed, then monetary compensation, which in time is the only true and lasting available relief that can be adjudicated. It is my view that slavery with economic and political considerations, the British, the Spanish, the Dutch, and the Portuguese, among other imperial powers, and they perceived slavery. They perceived it along the lines of political and economic imperatives. Emancipation was acceded to on political lines, with economic considerations being the forefront of the discussions, certainly as evidenced by actions of the British government in the 19th century. Slave companies were formed, shares were given, and taken up by tailors, traders, ships hired and staffed, insurance companies and religious bodies, and I indict the religious bodies equally as they led the slave trading companies in the country. Time does not permit me to go into the white Anglo-Saxon Protestant approach to the King James Version of the Bible, which rewrote Kepler Nagas out of the very Old Testament. These considerations allow for reparation for injuries from the crimes of war inflicted in the forced removal of people from their native homeland, from the human rights abuse of the Middle Passage and the plantation process which ensued, and from the wholesale abandonment of the newly freed chattel turned humans embodied in the Emancipation Proclamation and dehumanizing every aspect of their life. The stupidity of the argument, well-treated and educated slave and the beneficial heritage of an education system, a justice system, and a civil service bureaucracy, proffered by some as mitigation, must not be allowed to dignify the classing of humans as animals, which is what chattel slavery did. And the horrors of slavery must be not diluted in the demands for relief. The cane must be pressed, not just on behalf of the ghosts of the past, but on behalf of generations yet to come. The new generation of the next 200 years must be the beneficiaries of our collective actions now. Reparation must provide a lasting patrimony for generations of the future who will see that on both sides their future, unlike the past, was not impacted on individually by us or them, but was secured by we who acted collectively in the spirit of moral rectitude and political will. My research showed that we required a political decision by a parliament that we have a right to remedy for a right of this claim. That had never been a political decision by any Caribbean parliament till Jamaica in 2015. Why did I go that route? I knew that we had to look at the legal and the political. And so today I speak to my new draft petition, being brought in my name to the Judicial Committee Act of 1833. That Judicial Act will provide, and I quote from that act, to the King, "It shall be lawful for His Majesty to refer to the said Judicial Committee for hearing or consideration any such matters whatsoever as His Majesty shall think fit, and such committee shall thereupon hear or consider the same, and shall advise His Majesty thereon in the matter aforesaid." That is coming from the present body of luminaries that are working pro bono right now to prepare the petition in my name and to take it forward and ask the government and everyone else to join me in going for it now, not never. In that context, a key point of discussion during that meeting of April 14, 2021, was the formulation of the legal issues to be adjudicated. The proposed 4 legal issues to be advanced by the following. 1, whether holding people as chattel slaves under British rule was a crime against humanity. 2, whether slavery was a crime for which the government of the United Kingdom should be responsible. 3, whether the laws in Jamaica permitted slavery was unlawful, and whether there is a legal settlement or compensation. I've heard both presidents and prime ministers make their presentations. I said the time is now to make the decisions and to lead from the front. For now that the Jamaican political decision is made, it opens the door for Jamaica and the other Caribbean countries to take the matter to the International Court of Justice, to pursue reparation claims against all the countries who were involved in the slave trade for other forms of abuses as genocide, rape, murder, and the host of abused human rights under slavery. And therefore, the present legal team in my name are preparing a petition which will be taken to the Queen. In that team is, of course, the Honorable Frank Phipps, OJ QC, Mr. Bert Samuels, and Mr. Ian Wilkinson. And I ask the government to join me in moving on, as Mr. Holt, and in the United Kingdom, Mr. Edward Fitzgerald QC, English Bar, and Mr. Lawrence Cartier, another legal luminary, that are preparing that draft and that petition, and I'm asked them to try and make July the target to August to have that ready. So that examination is taking place, and I cannot thank them enough for having made that kind of effort as we prepare other issues to be addressed, as we decide to awaken the people to understand that the magnitude of the claim is perhaps so audacious that we don't want to face the realities of tomorrow. It's Africa Day, however. Time is of the essence, I'm told. So the economic pundits are saying that much of the world's projected growth is predicated on the out of Africa. One can see this. I share this view. I shared it in the multimodal approach of Africa as the center of where we spin. And by that extent, they would be part of the development of the South-South trade and the future. Before I close, let me read excerpts from a recent article by the Independent newspaper entitled "Britain's Colonial Shame, Slave Owners Giving Huge Payouts After Abolition." And I quote, "The true scale of Britain's involvement in the slave trade has been laid bare in documents revealing how the country's wealthiest families received the modern equivalent of billions of pounds in compensation after slavery was abolished." I pause to recognize that even the former Prime Minister of Britain, David Cameron, came here and shamed us in terms of what he said in our very parliament, where we have a martyred fight for slavery abolition. The previously unseen records show exactly who recorded what in payouts from the government. When slave ownership was abolished by Britain, much to the potential embarrassment of the descendants, Dr. Draper from University College, who has studied the compensation papers say as many as 1/5 of the wealthy Victorian Britons derived all of part of their fortunes for the slave economy. Professor Vern Shepherd has done a great deal of background check on these issues, and there are numbers and monies that relate, which is not part of what I will present today. Let me just say that if the fight has just begun, then I ask for the strength to continue, to fight for the reality of what we must face, to recognize that what we inherit today is a result of in the DNA of our society and in the whole aspect of our thinking, that if we can only remove from our minds what Garvey asked us to remove, none but our minds can free ourselves. And in that context, there's much more I would have presented today. But the fight continues, and it continues currently. It continues, as I said, into August, into September. I thank Minister Grange for having allowed me the position to be here to present that. All the other documents are now fully ready, even for the financial sector of the country. I have prepared a document that relates to what the financial impact must be and how it must be. I hope it doesn't frighten us to recognize that it's more than pay off all our debt. I don't think we should fail to appreciate that we could give 120 years leave of income tax to people of a sector if we wished, because immediacy of the position cries out for us to address it as soon as we can, as quickly as we can. And I say to Britain, pay us what you owe us. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you very much, Honorable Mike Henry. The brief was comprehensive. The case has been made. No dissent will be broached. And that was passionate and inspirational. The next speaker has the distinction of belonging to a small group of people globally whose progenitor is a national hero. Dr. Julius Garvey is a surgeon, medical professor, and son of Jamaica's first national hero, the Right Excellent Messiah, Marcus Messiah Garvey. He continues the legacy of being a very strong voice for Pan-Africanism. Dr. Garvey, good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Mr. Moderator, and good afternoon, everyone. I would like to thank Minister Grange for the opportunity to be present with you here to celebrate Africa Day. And good afternoon, fellow presenters, ladies and gentlemen around the world. It is indeed a pleasure to participate in a conversation with Africa and with Africans. As we engage in this conversation about Africa's destiny, it is important that we start with an understanding of our history. As Marcus Garvey said, history is the lens through which we look at the future. We are the first people, and as Homo sapiens sapiens originated in Africa some 200,000 years ago. We have a history of settled development that goes back to around 40,000 BC, and settlement along the Nile Valley that dates to 10,000 BC, and recorded civilizations that date from 4,000 BC. All arts, sciences, engineering, architecture, agriculture, medicine, astronomy, government, and cosmology started with us as an African people and were transmitted around the world. For the last 500 years, we have been subjected to invasion, imperialism, physical slavery, and colonialism that destroyed or displaced 50 million Africans around the world. This was a process of dehumanization, destruction of our culture, denial of our history, and miseducation that destroyed our African identity and replaced it with a caricature of a human being that a doctrine of white supremacy and systematic white racism wanted us to be. This has produced the mental afflictions of self-hate, self-doubt, distrust, dependency, inferiority, and the mindset that the European is the bearer of all wisdom, the arbiter of world destiny, and that we should emulate what he says and do what he tells us to do. Carter G. Woodson in 1933 said the educational system developed in Europe and the Americas and the resultant philosophy and ethics justified slavery, peonage, segregation, and lynching. Due to the Negro being taught the same philosophy, religion, literature, history, and economics that has established that code of morals, his mind has been brought under the control of his oppressor. Marcus Garvey in 1937 in a speech in Halifax, Nova Scotia said, "We're going to emancipate our minds from mental slavery because whilst others may free the body, none but ourselves can free the mind." We have not understood this, but have accepted physical freedom as our destination and have absorbed the materialist philosophy, scientific materialism, technological industrialization, and the capitalist economical system that Euro-America has developed, and therefore function within the parameters that our oppressors have developed. So perhaps we didn't so much win our freedom as we joined our enemy. These systems have exacerbated conflicts between people, brought the world to the brink of nuclear disaster, while depleting the non-renewable resources of the planet and creating deforestation, soil erosion, toxic waste, and pesticide buildup. We're running out of resources to feed the industrial economy, and as we create climate change, global warming, recurring recessions, we face the sixth global extinction. Clearly, what Europe has produced is a technological modernity based on the values and philosophy of scientific materialism, imperialism, and individualism. Modern education based on this philosophy has redefined knowledge as being based solely on scientifically measured facts. Only what is measurable exists or is worthwhile. 2 + 2 = 4 is a scientific fact and gives a mathematical certainty that transcends any value system. Objective values that form, therefore, the basis of virtue and character formation are dismissed as archaic ways of thought and behavior that have no place in a modern scientific and technologically advanced society. The world is thus rendered inherently meaningless. The story that's told is that it all started 15 billion years ago with a big bang. We don't know why or what preceded it, but here we are after blind chance and favorable genetic mutations, completely random without design or an intelligent designer. A conglomeration of chemical, biological, and physical processes with a lifespan of 70 in which we make do as best we can. And this modern reductionist view of the world as knowable only through facts is the basis of utilitarianism, but denies consciousness as primary and answers none of the questions, purpose, and the relationship of man to his environment. The universe is explained by facts and reason only, without any intelligent creative cause. So man is at the end of an evolutionary process that makes him supreme in nature, and the rational faculty supreme in man. This allows him to use logical scientific means for bringing natural forces under his control. Instead of being formative, is informative. The student is trained to manipulate information. Memorization is of maximum importance, and critical independent thinking is of little value and is indeed punished. The process turns out excellent sheep with very high grades. The general population is manipulated by the same process using information technology, mass media, propaganda, robotics, and other scientific innovations controlled by the scientists, the economic power brokers, and the state. We have gone from industrial capitalism to surveillance capitalism, where our thoughts, emotions, and behavior are monitored by ubiquitous digital devices, the predictive information being bought and sold and used for behavior modification. Our humanity has been reduced. We are mere physical entities with 5 senses experiencing physical events and sensations and responding with rational intelligence based on feelings. The more and better commodities supplied by the elite, the more gratified and happier we are. In order to keep the masses from being introspective or unhappy, the elite must provide progressively more, better, and tantalizing commodities. So scientific progress and innovation is at a premium. The scientist is God, and heaven is where the money and the goodies pile up. So as we become dehumanized, nature becomes assaulted and destabilized, and we enjoy the pornification of our culture. Clearly, what Europe has produced is a modern, technologically advanced society, and the errors in the basic assumptions of the philosophy associated with scientific materialism are responsible for the individualism, greed, anxiety, confusion, fear, violence, and chaos that are its hallmarks. Matthew Arnold said, civilization is the humanizing of man within society. Most European and American nations have not achieved that because of the limitation of their basic cosmology, derived from purely scientific facts, indicating a universe of stars, planets, and galaxies scattered in boundless space with no center, no goal, expanding rapidly and ultimately ending in collapse, the Big Crunch. And with human beings on a small planet circling the sun, products of blind chance and insentient nature. Africa and Africans in the diaspora, in order to survive and prosper, must discard the current Eurocentric ideologies and create a new paradigm. Fortunately, the African experience has always been a search for and a practice of what it means to be fully human. Our history is the longest in the world and the most glorious, since it gave us the origins of civilized living. Our cosmology and cosmogony has always been of one omnipotent, omnipresent, and omniscient source, intrinsic to all manifestation in nature, unifying us in an interconnected, integrating whole, which humans, as the highest created entity, can know in its splendor by consciousness and mind. A complete guide to human conduct and a just and moral society can be deduced from such a fundamental principle of oneness. The best of human nature, ethics, interpersonal relationships, cooperation, harmony, contentment, peace, stability, social organization, and a life ordered by the awareness of the oneness of the cosmos in its primary state of consciousness. The philosophical concept behind this was expressed in Kemet 5,000 years ago as Ma'at. Translated, this is truth, justice, harmony, order, balance, righteousness, and reciprocity. Ma'at concerns itself with the interrelatedness of all areas of reality, divine, cosmic, man, society, and the state. These dimensions must be balanced and are essentially one dimension. With this philosophy and spirituality, we can recreate African humanism as the new, old paradigm needed by us and all humanity now and in the future. All African educational systems beginning in Kemet are rooted in this cosmic view of a divine creation with humans as its highest expression, made in the divine image. The purpose of education socialization process was the transformation of the human towards the full expression of his or her divine potential. Marcus Garvey said, education is the process by which a people are prepared for the creation of their own particular civilization and their own advancement and glory. It is by education that we transmit our culture. Culture is the instrument by which we deal with reality and by which we adapt ourselves to reality. One's consciousness and mind creates and conceptualizes the belief systems through which one views the world and organizes reality. Thus, culture is an instrument of power because power is our ability to define reality. If we give up our culture and allow it to be replaced by somebody else's, then we have given up our ability to define our reality and become the servants of someone else. The battle now, therefore, is for the minds of our people. To create the paradigm of African humanism, we must have an educated populace. This is the only guarantee of the personal transformation necessary for success. Steve Biko said, the most potent weapon in the hands of the oppressor is the mind of the oppressed. Marcus Garvey said, a people without the knowledge of their past history, origin, and culture is like a tree without roots. African teachers must therefore understand African history, practices, spirituality, philosophy, pedagogical theories of education and socialization to create the space to facilitate the process of human transformation and a constant pursuit of perfection necessary to develop the new African. We have to create an educational system that is based squarely on the cosmology, ontology, and epistemology of Africa's agency in the world over the last 6,000 years of recorded history. Western scientific epistemologies have increasingly lost any link to the sacred and are presiding over the destruction of humanity. We cannot have human development without self-knowledge. We cannot have sustainable economic and social development without maximizing our human resources. If we do not change the current direction of going along with the Eurocentric paradigm, we too will self-destruct. The development of the human self and its perfection is essential to the establishment and maintenance of culture and civilization. We can only survive as individual societies and as a species based on a moral character and the establishment of virtue. As Russia, in order to develop its own civilization based on communism, created the Iron Curtain, China similarly to create its own civilization model of state capitalism, created the Bamboo Curtain. We too must create the Ubuntu Curtain and reshape the institutions left to us by colonization with those shaped by our own traditions. We owe it to all the millions of ancestors who have died in our freedom struggles to create our own imagined civilizational state as a guarantor of peace, harmony, prosperity, justice, and a true democracy. We must break the remaining shackles of imperialism in our negotiations with the World Trade Organization, the World Bank, the IMF, the United Nations, and the OECD. Marcus Garvey said, "It is only through our spirituality and science that we can combat the naked materialism of the current age." He further said, "If you desire to accomplish greatness, you must first decide in your own mind in what direction you desire to seek greatness. And when you have decided in your own mind, work incessantly towards it. Remember always, intelligence rules the world and ignorance carries the burden." I think the meaning of Ubuntu can be summed up in the motto, one God, one aim, one destiny, one love. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Garvey, for your powerful words and your call to action. It is always a beautiful gift to see you channeling your parents, the Right Excellent Marcus Mosiah Garvey and Amy Jakes Garvey. Thank you. The next speaker's reputation precedes him as a statesman extraordinaire, having had a long and distinguished political career since 1958, encompassing numerous positions of leadership, including 3 terms as Prime Minister of Jamaica. He has had a very close association with the African Union and is currently the statesman in residence at the P.J. Patterson Center for Africa Caribbean Advocacy at the University of the West Indies. Good afternoon, Most Honorable P.J. Patterson.
As we celebrate African Union Day, the P.J. Patterson Center for Africa Caribbean Advocacy is pleased to extend its warmest congratulations and appreciation at the invitation which has allowed our participation in the memorable exchanges on which we have embarked today. In doing so, we recall with pride our African ancestry. We readily acknowledge the common challenges for optimum development we have faced, and we reaffirm our solidarity in the search to realize our noble aspirations. I join as a member of the diaspora with others all over the world in that warm fellowship which has been nourished by our history and driven by the compelling urge to realize our rich potential for achievement through collective action. As we reflect on the past, which has been cruel and inhumane, we can confidently rely on our proven resilience to strengthen us for the battles ahead. My brothers and sisters, the past year has been entirely different from anything we have ever known. COVID-19, global warming, a spate of natural disasters, and massive migration, whether due to ethnic strife or the desperate search for a better life, have all combined in different ways to accept that the world of yesteryear is no longer fit for purpose. The desperate unpredictability as to the time and the contours of that new global system which eventually emerges impel us to mold that brand new world which future generations will inhabit on this single planet in peace. The obsolete world order, fashioned by the victors of World War II, has served the developed world admirably. Conversely, those of us who were never present at Bretton Woods due to colonial rule and oppressive regimes have found that the decks are heavily stacked against us, and we have been victims disproportionately in areas of poverty, hunger, ignorance, disease, and homelessness. We have won the combat against imperial domination and apartheid, but the scourges of exploitation and racism are still alive and flourishing. It is our prophet Peter Tosh who reminds us that while we desire peace, it must be preceded by justice. For without justice, there can be no peace. Our topic today implores us to search for peace, prosperity, strength, and unity. We need at the outset to realize that our collective strength and that complete unity which is forged in the fiery furnace must be the foundation on which we build to enjoy true and lasting prosperity. At the outset of the pandemic, our center made an unequivocal call for unity between Africa and the Caribbean, including Cuba, in facing the COVID-19 pandemic, which has exposed us to incalculable perils. The denial to make the vaccine available to poor and medium-sized developing countries has resulted in a new form of pharmaceutical hegemony and patent imperialism. We strongly support the call of South Africa and India for the TRIPS waiver and the call by the WTO for increased production of vaccines, for equitable access to all countries on a range of medical products in order to bring COVID under full control in every continent and island. In this veil of uncertainty, the only thing we know for sure, things will never be the same again in the fields of trade, financial flows, travel, health, education, technology, and patterns of social behavior. In this unfolding scenario, Africa and the Caribbean, with the active engagement of our influential diaspora and our allies in Asia and Latin America, must insist that we are fully represented at the negotiation table. No one else can promote and protect our vital interests better than ourselves through unity which engenders collective strength and thereby protects our common interests. The new global architecture must ensure that areas where we have a vital interest cannot be simply pledges that are never honored or pious declarations which are completely and quickly forgotten. Whether it is the Durban Declaration, the Doha Round for Trade and Development, or the Paris Climate Accord. We are convinced that our umbilical connection and the acceleration of crises in our time oblige us to mobilize a trans-global condition so as to secure our rightful place and fulfill our destiny in the world of tomorrow. The PJ Patterson Center expects this timely conversation as a precursor of many more to come. The immortal spirit of Nelson Mandela demands the establishment of an institutional dialogue so that we can formulate strategies for effective intervention in our post-pandemic economic, social, and political recovery. Our global institutions and our relationships have revealed devastating structural failures. What the world needs now is a bold and modern design for this millennium, brand new global architecture. Whatever we may achieve through governmental and collaborative institutional arrangements, the value of people-to-people contact is quintessential. Culture has always bonded the multi-identity civil society of the African diaspora. Marcus Garvey's unifying global arousal was based on a template of common culture to which people of African descent could relate and find unity of purpose. It is the cultural element that will most effectively galvanize people of African descent everywhere. This culture affinity has been consolidated through the arts, in particular our music. In this, the genre of Jamaican reggae has been a critical unifying force. Music is entertainment which brings people together, and so too are sports exchanges. We can do much more if we can transform them into the economic engine that could drive our collective trans-global economic synergy. Let the conversation continue and be intensified so that we can breathe again and ensure that we will overcome one day, which is not too distant from today.
Thank you very much, Most Honorable P.J. Patterson, former Prime Minister, and we look forward to your continued work through the P.J. Patterson Center for Africa Caribbean Advocacy. Well, this brings us to the close of the second session on Africa Day. My name is Cordell Green, and it was a pleasure being your moderator. And may I take moderator's privilege to thank and congratulate you, the Honorable Olivia Grange, for the execution of this excellent initiative, and also Your Excellency Lumka Yengeni for being such a gracious facilitator. But the last word and the person properly to extend thanks is the chair of Jamaica's National Council on Reparation, Mrs. Lalita Davis Mattis, and it's my pleasure to hand over to her.
Mr. Cordell Green, moderator. Honorable Olivia Grange, Minister of Culture, Gender, Entertainment and Sport. Honorable Mike Henry, former Minister of Government and Champion for Reparation. Her Excellency, Ambassador Lumka Yangeni, the Most Honorable P.J. Patterson, former Prime Minister of Jamaica and statesman in residence at the P.J. Patterson Center for Africa Caribbean Advocacy. Professor Sir Hilary Beckles, Chair of the Caribbean Reparations Council and Vice Chancellor of the University of the West Indies. Professor Vereen Shepherd, Director, Center for Reparation Research at the UWI. Dr. Julius Garvey, Pan-Africanist, surgeon and activist. Africans and people of African descent, all online guests, and those who will watch later, staff of the Office of the Prime Minister, staff of the Ministry of Culture, Gender, Entertainment and Sport, the media. Today is a day well spent. Today is a day well spent for those of us who participated in today's online events. Our engagement with Africa is an engagement with ourselves. It's an engagement with our past, which collides with a future that we should consciously seek to forge together. Our future as Black people, of people of African lineage, provides opportunities for the development of a race that has suffered far too long, still exhibited in experiences like that of George Floyd. Just to name a few, one out of the many injustices meted out to Black people, many never mentioned. It's about not being afraid to associate with Africa, or with ourselves, or with the fact that our skin is darker, because it's naturally rich in melanin. It's about dispelling the images that we see about ourselves every day, about not embracing the labels that we are given or that we give to ourselves. Reparation is about the future. The next generation navigates the global roadworks without fear because of the color of the skin. Reparation is now. Do enjoy the rest of Africa Day. Thank you.
Don't care where you come from, Black man, you're an African. No mind your nationality, you have got the identity of an African. If you come from Clarendon, and if you come from Portland, if you come from Westmoreland, you're an African. Don't care where you come from, as long as you're a Black man. None of mind your nationality, you've got the identity. Cause if you come from Trinidad, if you come from Nassau, I said if you come from a Cuba, don't care where you coming from, as long as you're a Black man. None of mind your nationality, you've got the identity. I said if you go to the Catholic, and if you go to the Methodist, I said if you go to Church of God, don't care where you coming from, as long as you're a Black man. None of mind your nationality, you've got the identity. I said if you come from Brixton, and if you come from a Wheelsden, South